The dust is settled, and it is still extremely hard to believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers defense laid that much of an egg on Thursday Night Football to the Cincinnati Bengals. 33-31 loss in Cincinnati. And while there are some positives to take away from that game, Aaron Rodgers, another 4-touchdown performance. Pat Fryermuth has been found, and he is alive and well, as he has over 100 yards receiving and adds a touchdown for his efforts. But the defense was, let's just say, awful, for lack of a better word. Chase Brown has 11 carries for 108 yards. When coming into the game, the Cincinnati Bengals had the absolute worst rush offense in the National Football League, historically so. They were only rushing for under 60 yards a game, and yet they were able to pretty much do what they want with the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Jamar Chase gets 16 receptions, and it could have been worse because he dropped a few, but he had 16 receptions for 161 yards. And of course, this all leads back to the man that strikes fear into Mike Tomlin, and that is a man that they don't have to build a statue for because he's already a statue, and that's Joe Flacco. 342 pass yards and 3 touchdowns. And you can read the stats, but anybody who watched that game just watched it and said, man, this Steelers defense, not that they looked disinterested, but poor tackling up and down the field for 4 consecutive quarters. And then just as they came out of halftime, they once again show that they have an inability to adjust successfully to this Cincinnati Bengals offense. In the first half, listen, they built a 10-0 lead, and that was on the back of a couple of defensive stops. But as Cincinnati was able to get some momentum, as they were able to start finding Jamar Chase, start finding T. Higgins, the Steelers defense had no answers. Let's go to man. Okay, let's go to man. Let's go to zone. Okay, that means in the biggest moment of the game, we're going to leave Jamar Chase, who already has 15 receptions, with 15 yards of padding and nobody around him. They had no answers at all on Thursday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. It is a massively disappointing loss. And I think along with everybody else that was watching that game that was hoping for a Steelers victory, came away extremely aggravated with the performance of the Pittsburgh Steelers on the road on Thursday night. But I've seen a lot of people burying this team. I do think that it is still too early to press the panic button on the Pittsburgh Steelers. I understand that that was a rough loss. I've called it disappointing already. I've called it so many words over the last 6 days. But it's not the end of the world, because if you look at where the Steelers stand after that performance, they're still 4-2. Cincinnati is the closest team to them, and they have a losing record still at 3-4. So they're in good standing in the division. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, the offense continues to put itself on an upward trajectory. If the defense, and I said this on Thursday on X, the defense plays to its paycheck, the Steelers might be sitting in a pretty good spot. The question is, are they going to be able to bounce back from this performance? I'd have to imagine they will, right? So I think it's still a little too early to press the panic button on the entire season for the Steelers. But I will say this. There is a concern that starts to creep into your head, and it has to if you've watched this team at all since 2015. This was supposed to be the year that it all changed for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They went out and they made moves that they had never made in the past. They waited for months to make sure that they got Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback. They made a huge trade and signed a huge contract for a skill position on the offensive side of the football in DK Metcalf. They bolstered that defensive line in the NFL draft, something that was a big area of need after last season. They got Derek Harmon in the first round. They bring in Y.A. Black, so they're hoping that those youngsters can help bolster the run defense. They go out and make the Jalen Ramsey trade, getting rid of somebody who was a leader on the Steelers defense in Minkah Fitzpatrick and bringing in a player like Jalen Ramsey. They tried to continue to add to the cornerback room by bringing in a Super Bowl champion and a guy who has proven in the past that he can handle those tough one-on-one matchups in Darius Slay. It was supposed to change the narrative of the last 8 seasons. The Steelers have been, for the last almost decade now, a team that you can basically predict their season before it even begins. They're going to have a winning record, 9, potentially 10 wins. They're going to make the playoffs. If not, they're going to just miss on the last week of the season. But if they make the playoffs, don't worry, because they're not going to win a playoff game. They haven't done that since January of 2017, when Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Ben Roethlisberger were the 3 big names on the Steelers' offense. And while this doesn't automatically signal that in the future for the Steelers, you don't want to see them falling into old habits. And that's what happened on Thursday night. The Pittsburgh Steelers fell into a habit that they have had through a large portion of Mike Tomlin's career, which is not being able to win on the road on Thursday night, but specifically on the road on a Thursday night against an AFC North opponent in a game where the opponent is far below expectations of where you're at the moment. It's a classic Mike Tomlin game that we saw on Thursday night. And that, to me, is a little worrisome because, as I mentioned, this was supposed to be the year the narrative changed. And the more things we see that mirror what they've had happen in the past couple of years, the more likely you're going to start to feel like their fate is going to be the same as well. So not only is it, quote unquote, the Mike Tomlin game, high profile defense fails to show up. Specifically, the high profile run defense fails to show up, and you lose momentum as the season goes on. Those are the things you have to hope that the Steelers are able to just kind of plant their foot and say that was a one-off performance. Because it's hard to win in the NFL. Things happen. You have disappointing losses, sometimes Mike Tomlin more than others, but you have to hope that that is the only glimpse of the same old Steelers that we get in 2025. Because if they continue to do the same things, what is going to change in the AFC playoffs? It is a year in which the conference itself leans towards the Steelers being able to make a run. It's not as strong as it used to be. The Bills' defense is not that strong. It's something that the Steelers, especially with Aaron Rodgers at the helm, could take advantage of. Kansas City is an interesting team, and I think in January they're still going to be the team to beat. But you look around the rest of the conference. Is Indianapolis somebody that's going to be a powerhouse? So far, they've shown that to be the case. But again, what does that look like in January in the playoffs? Same thing goes for teams like the Chargers. Same thing goes for teams like the New England Patriots, who the Steelers already beat. So the AFC is as wide open as it's been in a long time. Now, maybe that just opens it up to let the Kansas City Chiefs make another AFC championship win and another run to the Super Bowl. But I'd like to think that it opens the door for other teams too, particularly the Pittsburgh Steelers. So while I'm not pressing the panic button, there are some seeds of doubt that climb into the back of your head when you see something like that happen, something that you've seen before. It's deja vu all over again, for lack of a better term. So I think that's something that you're just going to have to keep your eyes on as we get set here to go through a pretty brutal stretch for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need to get back on track, and it's not going to be easy. 2 home games, fortunately, so they don't have to go on the road. They don't have to get on a plane at all. They take on the Packers on Sunday Night Football this week. They then take on the Indianapolis Colts on Sunday afternoon the following week. That's going to be a litmus test as to where the Steelers and the Colts are at that point. Basically, a battle to see who's real as far as being a contender in the AFC. And then they take on an LA Chargers team who has lost a little bit of steam themselves on Monday Night Football on the road in 3 weeks. So it's an interesting game. It's a tough loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not the end of the world because you're still 4-2, but it is something that I'm looking at, and I'm getting a little bit skeptical. I'm starting to poke a little bit more holes in the Steelers to the Super Bowl discussion that we all thought we were going to have as they were 4-1, defeating teams with ease like they did the Cleveland Browns. Things that don't happen typically in Pittsburgh. Let's hope that they continue to do things that haven't happened in Pittsburgh over the last 8 years. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Got plenty more coming your way this week on Nick Belsky on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. We'll see you guys next time.